Hi Year 6, today I will be reading The Boy in the Stripy Pyjamas, chapter 11, and this chapter is called The Fairy. Some months earlier, just after Father received the new uniform, which meant that everyone had to call him Commandant. And just before Bruno came home to find Maria packing up his things, Father came home one evening in a state of a great excitement, which was terribly unlike him, and marched into the living room where Mother, Bruno, and Gretel were sitting reading their books. Thursday night, he pronounced, "If we have any plans for Thursday night, we have to cancel them. You can change your plans if you want to go. You can change your plans if you want to," said Mother. "But I've made arrangements to go to the theatre with the Fury has something he wants to discuss with me," said Father, who was allowed to interrupt Mother even if no one else was. "I just got a phone call this afternoon. The only time he can make it is Thursday evening, and he's invited himself to dinner." Mother's eyes opened wide and her mouth shaped off an O. Bruno stared at her and wondered whether this was what he looked like when he was surprised about something. "But you're not serious," said Mother, growing a little pale. "He's coming over to our house?" Father nodded. "At 7 o'clock, he said, so we'd better think about something special for dinner." "Oh my," said Mother, her eyes moving back and forth quickly as she started to think of all the things that needed doing. "Who's the fairy?" asked Bruno. "You're pronouncing it wrong," said Father, pronouncing it correctly for him. "The Fury," said Bruno again, him trying to get it right but still failing again. "No," said Father, "Oh, never mind. Well, who is he anyway?" asked Bruno again. Father stared at him, astonished. "You know perfectly well who the fairy is," he said. "I don't," said Bruno. He runs the country, idiot," said Gretel, showing us as sisters tend to do. It was things like this that made her such a hopeless case. "Don't you ever read a newspaper?" Don't call your brother an idiot, please," said Mother. "Can I call him stupid?" "I'd rather you didn't." Gretel sat down disappointed, but stuck her tongue out at Bruno nonetheless. "Is he coming?" asked Mother. I forgot to ask," said Father, "but I presume that he'll bring her with him." "Oh my," said Mother again, standing up and counting in her head the number of things she needs to organize before Thursday, which was only 2 evenings away. The house would be cleaned from top to bottom, the windows washed, the dining room table stained and varnished, the food ordered, the maids and the butlers' uniforms washed and pressed, and the crockery and the glasses polished until they sparkled. Somehow, despite the fact that the list seemed to grow longer and longer all the time, Mother managed to get everything finished on time, although she commented over and over again that evening would be a greater success if some people helped out a little bit more around the house. An hour before the fairy was due to arrive, Gretel and Bruno were brought downstairs where they received a rare invitation into their father's office. Gretel was wearing a white dress and knee socks, and her hair had been twisted into corkscrew curls. Bruno was wearing a pair of dark brown shorts and a plain white shirt and a dark brown tie. He had a new pair of shoes for the occasion, and was very proud of them, even though they were too small for him and were pinching his feet and making it difficult for him to walk. All these preparations and the fine clothes seemed to be a little extravagant. All the same, because Bruno and Gretel weren't invited to the dinner, they had to eat an hour earlier. "Now, children," said Father, sitting behind his desk and looking from his son to his daughter and back again as they stood before him. You know that there is a very special evening ahead of us, don't you?" They nodded. And that is very important for my career. That tonight goes well. They nodded. There are a number of ground rules which need to be set down before we begin. Father was a big believer in ground rules. Whenever there was a special or important occasion in the house, more of them were created. "Number 1," said Father, "when the fairy arrives, you will stand in the hall quietly and prepare to greet him. You do not speak until he speaks to you, and then you reply in one clear tone, indicating each word precisely. Is that understood?" "Yes, Father," mumbled Bruno. "That's exactly the type of thing we don't want," said Father, referring to the mumbling. "You open your mouth and speak like an adult. The last thing we need is for either of you to start behaving like children. If the fairy ignores you, then you do not say anything either. But look directly ahead and show him the respect and courtesy that such a great leader deserves." Of course, Father," said Gretel in a clear voice. And when Mother and I are at dinner with the fairy, you're both to remain in your rooms very quietly. There will be no running around, no sliding down the banisters, and here he looked very deliberately at Bruno. "And no interrupting us. Is that understood? I don't want either of you causing chaos." Bruno and Gretel nodded, and Father stood up to indicate that this meeting was an end. "The ground rules are established," he said. 3/4 of an hour later, the doorbell rang, and the house interrupted in excitement by standing at the staircase. Mother at the staircase, and Mother waited beside them, wringing her hands together nervously. Father gave them a quick glance and nodded, looking pleased by what he saw, and then opened the door. Two people stood outside, a rather small man and a tall woman. Father saluted them and ushered them inside, where Maria had bowed her head lower than usual. Took their coats, and the introductions were made. They spoke to Mother first, which gave Bruno an opportunity to stare at their guests and decided for himself whether they deserved all the fuss being made of them. The fury was far shorter than Father, and not Bruno supposed. Quite as strong. He had dark hair which was cut quite short and a tiny moustache which was so tiny. In fact, Bruno wondered why he bothered with it at all, or whether he had simply forgotten a piece when he was shaving. The woman standing beside him, however, was quite the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. She had beautiful blonde hair and very red lips. And while the Fury spoke to Mother, and she turned and looked at Bruno and smiled, making him go red in embarrassment. "And these are my children, Fury," said Father as Gretel and Bruno stepped forward. "Gretel, Bruno, and which is which?" the Fury said, which made everyone laugh except for Bruno, who thought it was perfectly obvious which was which, and hardly caused a joke. The Fury stretched out his hand and shook theirs, and Gretel gave a careful, rehearsed courtesy. Bruno was delighted when it went wrong and she almost fell over. "What charming children," said the beautiful blonde woman. "And how old are they, may I ask?" "I'm 12 and he's only 9, said Gretel, looking at her brother with disdain. "And I speak French too," she added, which was not strictly speaking true, although she had learned a few phrases in school. "Yes, but why would you want to?" asked the Fury. And this time no one laughed. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, and Gretel stared at him, unsure whether he wanted an answer or not. The matter was resolved quickly. However, as the Fury, who was the rudest guest Bruno had ever witnessed, turned round and walked directly into the dining room and promptly sat down on the head of the table in Father's seat. Without another word, a little fluttered. Mother and Father followed him inside, and Mother gave the instruction to the laird that he could start heating up the soup. "I can speak French too," said the beautiful blonde woman, leaning down and smiling at the two children. She didn't seem to be as frightened of the Fury as Mother and Father were. "French is a beautiful language, and you are very clever to be learning it." Ava, shouted the Fury from the other room, clicking his fingers as if she was some sort of puppy dog. The woman rolled her eyes and stood up slowly and turned around. I like your shoes, Bruno, but they look a little tight on you, she added with a smile. If they are, you should tell your mother before they cause you to injure yourself. They are a little tight, admitted Bruno. I normally don't wear my hair in curls, said Gretel, jealous of the attention that her brother was getting. But why not? Asked the woman. It's so pretty that way. Ava, roared the Fury for the second time, and now she started to walk away from them. It was lovely to meet you both, she said, before stepping into the dining room and sitting towards the stairs. But Bruno stayed rooted to the ground, watching the blonde woman until she caught his eye again and waved to him. Just as father appeared and closed the doors with a jerk off his head, from which Bruno understood that it was time to go to his room, to sit quietly and not to make a noise, and certainly not to slide down any banisters. The Fury and Ava stayed for the best part of 2 hours. And neither Gretel nor Bruno were invited downstairs to say goodbye to them. Bruno had watched them leave from his bedroom window and noticed that they stepped towards their car, which he was impressed to see. He had a chauffeur. I really don't like this word. The Fury did not open the door for his companion. I don't know how to say that. Companion. But instead climbed in and started reading a newspaper, while she said goodbye at once to Mother and thanked her for the lovely dinner. What a horrible man, thought Bruno. Later that night, Bruno overheard snippets of Mother and Father's conversation. Certain phrases drifted through the keyhole or under the door of Father's office and up the staircase and round the landing and under the door of Bruno's bedroom. The voices were unusually loud, and Bruno could make out a few words of their conversation. Their voices were unusually loud, and Bruno could only make out a few fragments of them. To leave Berlin and for such a place, Mother was saying, no choice, at least not if we want to continue, said Father. As if it's not the most natural thing in the world, and it's just not, said Mother. What would happen is I would be taken away and treated like a, said Father. Accept them to grow up in a place like, said Mother. And that's an end to the matter. I don't want to hear another word of the subject, said Father. That must have been the end of the conversation, because Mother had left Father's office then and Bruno fell asleep. A couple of days later, He came home from school to find Maria standing in his bedroom, pulling all of his belongings out the wardrobe and packing them in 4 large wooden crates. Even things he hidden at the back that had belonged to him were nobody else's business. That's where the story had begun. Hope you guys enjoyed chapter 11, The Fury.